Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Season 6, Episode 1.
Welcome back, friends. Today we traveled to Los Angeles, California to hang out with an innovator. Most people have a hero, an inspiration that they strive to emulate. Others want to carve their own path. Our guest today goes by Mad in the Hat, although he's also doing a bunch of other stuff these days, which I didn't even realize, but we'll get to it. Welcome to the show, David Cannava.
Thank you.
Cannava?
Cannava.
God, I'm so bad. I just asked you that.
No worries.
That's funny. So
Cannava cup of coffee. It's like Italian.
Dude, I already had mine. So who are you and what are you passionate about?
Oh man, I'm a drummer, but I'm just an all around creative. I started off in drumming. I came to Los Angeles for drumming, and then it's spawned into now I'm in the film industry. I still work in the music industry, but I just love being involved with creativity. But I also love I love leading people too, and that's what I figured out is kind of where I'm going to now. Is like I like to lead the direction and then build the teams and then direct that. And that's kind of where I'm at now.
Yeah, creative direction. I mean, so I had my buddy Kyle Lehman. He owns like a creative studio. So he's a photographer, and back in my zone, he was on season 1. And he kind of moved up through the music industry where he was like going on stadium tours and stuff like that. And then he found himself transitioning into wanting to be back home because he wanted to get married and settle down. So he came back home and then opened up this cool creative studio. And then he was leading like 20 some creatives to like do all these projects. And then after a little while was like, I kind of want to just do my own thing a little bit more again. So now he downsized his whole thing again. And again, we'll get to it, but it's cool, and you have like complete freedom to kind of like go wherever you feel like at that point in time.
Yeah.
So how can people best follow you, get familiar with the things that you do? Obviously, like you have a YouTube presence and a bunch of cool stuff on there, but what's the best way people can follow you, get familiar, and get in contact?
Well, let's see. There's 3. I have my Mad in the Hat Instagram page, which to be honest, I've been slacking on. I haven't even touched it since the beginning of the pandemic. And then I have my just a personal Instagram page, which is David_Cannava. And then I have my other page, which I'm mainly working now, which is Create This LA. And that has to do with all the visual creative stuff we do. Actually, we'll sound too. We do music, visual, film, music videos, all that type of thing. We're kind of a boutique creative studio utilizing XR as well as just any other medium we can to kind of create some awesome stuff.
Cool. So what's the handle? If somebody wanted to like DM you or something like I did, which one would you prefer?
I'd say Mad in the Hat, or let's see. Mad in the Hat Drums is where you can get in touch with me personally, or the other team is Create This LA. So honestly, either one of those I'm kind of in touch with now and posting stuff, but it kind of depends. So music is more Mad in the Hat, and then anything like visually creative is going to be Create This LA because that's with my whole team I'm running. But my main focus is Create This LA now. So that's probably the best spot.
Dope. Okay, so I obviously always research people ahead of time, right? Which, by the way, shout out Wayne Hoffman. I've said him before. He's the f***ing homie. He hooked this interview up. So super stoked. That guy's the best. But anyway, so my general understanding of like the summary of your whole like career is that you grew up in Colorado. You played drums, you played with like bands and stuff. At some point you got into the YouTube space and were doing a bunch of like covers and stuff that got a bunch of attention. You got signed by somebody. At some point you moved to LA to work with other artists. So that way, and then you were making music that was used for other things. I don't know if it was like TV or what, but it was used for other stuff. You eventually then kind of transitioned into this Mad in the Hat thing, which is like kind of like a character, right? Where you were doing not just drums. Now all of a sudden you have all these visuals. You're like a DJ that's like a maestro. And it's this whole like pretty dope persona. And then quarantine hit, and now you're doing, wow, you can get in and explain that, but is that summary pretty correct?
Yeah, well done.
Okay, cool.
Good research.
Cool. Can you, in your own words, give me a little bit better of a breakdown of the story of how you came to like where you're sitting right now?
Yeah. So I grew up in Colorado Springs. As you know, my father's a drummer, so that obviously had a major influence on me. And he was in the military, and then he left the military, and he used military, because military gives you education once you leave. like a GI Bill is a common thing. So my dad was able to use his financial education to get education from a drummer named Zorro. And Zorro was like the drummer for Lenny Kravitz, Earth, Wind & Fire. He's like one of the main top guys. He ended up coming out and staying at our house when I was like 13 a couple times and training my dad. He was also doing some clinics in Colorado Springs and ended up being like a major influence on me naturally because he was this like world-renowned drummer coming and hanging with me. So that put me on this path of like, that's what I want to do. And Zorro, his business model was he wasn't like the drummer for one band. He was like a hired musician, a session musician. He'd play with this artist, he'd go on tour with this artist, et cetera, et cetera. So I went through high school and was playing, getting better and better. And I got to the point where I was really passionate. I was probably practicing once I got home from school. And it was like, I get home at like 3:30 and then play till 10 every day. So I was like really shedding a lot. And the musician world is shedding, like you're practicing all the time. And then got done with high school, went to college and studied, like did a minor in music there, and then left to Denver because there's just no opportunity for music in Colorado Springs. It's a small town. So I hit Denver, pretty much maxed out what I could do in Denver. I opened up for I was in like one of the top local bands there, and we opened up for like Mayor Hawthorne, for One Republic, The Fray, everybody. And within like 9 months, I kind of maxed that whole scene out. So I was like, all right, I got to get to the bigger city. And initially I was going to move to New York. I loved New York City. I thought it was amazing. And I thought like just get to a major music city. But before then I went to Nashville on a business trip or whatever. And actually Zorro at the time lived in Nashville. So I went and took a drum lesson from him. And he was like, New York City's awesome, but just make sure, because every music city has its particular pull. So like New York is more like jazz and theater. Nashville is more like, country, Christian rock. And then you have LA is more like, rock, pop, funk, whatever. And so he said, make sure you pick your city that you want to go in based on the type of music you want. And I had never even thought about that. So then I was within that same band in Denver, and we had a gig out in LA. So I came out here, I was just like, oh my God, this is my vibe. It's all just entertainment scene. It was exciting. And of course, like this city is interesting. It's very captivating. It seems easier than it is when you first come, because it's like everything's here. Like now that I've lived here and worked here, that was about eight and a half years ago. Now I've worked with a lot of people that most people would know. But at the beginning, it's like you show up, you're like, oh my gosh, everybody's here. This is going to be so easy. And of course, it's like fall on your face, and that was, so actually what happened there. So I was in Denver and I was working for a college while I was doing music. And then once I worked at that college for a year, I was able to transfer. And so I transferred out to the Hollywood school because it was an art institute school. So then I worked at that school for 6 or 8 months. And then took the jump off the cliff to be like, all right, I'm going to go for music full time. And of course that was just fall flat on my face, lived for 3 months. And then I had to put all my stuff in storage because I had burned through my savings, quote unquote, which is only like 12,000, but 12,000 out here goes very quickly. So I was like 3 months into that, I had to put all my stuff in storage and went and just started couch surfing. So I went homeless. So I was with different friends, just staying, and then I met my girlfriend, who I've been with since then, actually. And so I started staying with her, and then she helped me build up everything. So then I was starting to do more and more cool drum projects. So I was doing, I became the music director for a couple different projects. I was music director for an artist named Sarah, she was a Capitol Records priority artist at the time. And we went out and did some touring in Europe and Finland. That was really fun out in Finland. And then I kind of reached this point where I was playing with a lot of great musicians. My friend Dave Yaden, he's a Grammy award-winning pianist. I can list all these musician names, and they're all amazing. And then even some of my drummer friends who were like playing with some of the best artists were still struggling, like constantly. Like they couldn't get enough work. They couldn't, I was like, man, what do we do? So I figured, I was like, I gotta create something that I have some ownership in. So during this time, I forgot, before I came out to California as well, I did a cover video. And the initial one I did was actually, I did a series that was kind of like just for demos. I just wanted to show myself playing 5 different styles. So I went like gospel, rock, pop, funk, and jazz, I think were the styles I picked. And then after that, I decided to do a cheesy pop song. So at the time, Justin Bieber's Baby, which is hilarious.
I watched that.
was like the #1 song in the world. It was hitting all these numbers. So I was like, whatever. I'm just going to like cover this song and release it. And then one of the versions, which at the time it was my ex-girlfriend, released it on her channel, and it got like, 500,000 views, and it started like getting traction. I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool. So then I started just doing weekly covers, and I ended up building up like a decent audience on YouTube. And then I moved out to LA with that ammo, because that's some attention basically. So then Roland, who's the like an electronic keyboards and drum company, they contacted me and were like, hey, we saw what you're doing, love what you're doing, was thinking maybe you could add some of our equipment. And so they ended up sponsoring me. So I started this Roland deal, which kind of started me down this path in the electronic world. So during that time, I got into electronic music, and it was more the mainstream type of electronic music, which is fine, but I just didn't know much else at the time. So then I studied that, and then I was playing at this show. Every year, there's this major music convention called NAMM. And NAMM is basically where all these music companies come together and they showcase all their products that they're coming out for the next year. But it's also like the biggest musician hang, because every musician from everywhere just comes all over the world. They want to hang, they want to see what the new products are, whatever. So it's just like a great networking time, etc. So Roland hired me many years, or like several years in a row, to just do their demos. So I'd come in there. At the time, it was like, I loved electronic kits. I thought they were cool, but I would kind of just play them like I would an electronic or an acoustic kit. So I just kind of played normal drums. I'd find a kit that sounded like the way I like to tune my drums, and then I'd just be on the stage, and then different people would come out. They'd give me their like newest kit, and I'd showcase it for them. So one year, this guy named Michael Shack comes out, and Michael Shack is this guy from Belgium. He's a good friend of mine. He's awesome. He's an older guy too. He's like early 50s now, but he's just like this super energetic, has like this amazing charisma. And he came out and he did this demo on an electronic kit, and he did it in a way that I had never seen anybody do. Because instead of just playing drums like you would play drums on an acoustic kit, he was like, this is an electronic kit. It's like playing an electric guitar. Like, you don't play an electric guitar like you do an acoustic guitar. It's a different instrument. So that, just him seeing that, what he would do is he would take like samples of songs and like loop them and trigger them, whatever, and just play the drums on top of them. So that really inspired me. And I was like, okay, based on where I'd come from with all this YouTube following, I got this Roland thing, and I'm realizing like I'm playing pop in these pop bands and this underground electronics. It's dope. But like I'm hitting a ceiling because I'm only ever being able to be hired by artists. I'm always limited by what those artists do. And I was massively frustrated because I'm super aggressive and like very go-getter, and most of these artists are not. So it was like, have a good artist, and they're amazing artists, and they're just kind of like fluttering around and whatever, nothing's happening. I'm like, man, I'm really hungry for these opportunities. So I was like, I've got to create something that I have control over. So my initial thought was, all right, I started with Mad Hatter was kind of my initial thing, because I've always loved Disney, and Mad Hatter seemed kind of like a goofy character to be kind of fun. So my first show, I started this simple thing with, some pop songs or whatever, and I just playing drums over top. And that was my first Mad Hatter show. And like a month later, I was like, all right, I got to make sure I can use this name. And of course, it was all copyrighted through everything Disney. So I searched for the name, and me and my friend kind of came up with Mad in the Hat. And the concept was kind of a mix between Cat in the Hat, Mad Hatter, and but also the Mad stood for MAD, maestro and drummer. So I became using an electronic kit, because with an electronic kit, you don't just have to play drum samples. You can put bass lines and string samples and whatever. And so I started layering my own samples on this, and then I play tracks, and I would actually go into the tracks I was playing, and I'd remove pieces of them. I'd use all kinds of editing stuff and remove the drums, remove the bass lines, remove leads, or loop parts of the song that didn't have that, and then leave others that did. And so then I could trigger certain things, and it was really amazing. So then I started out with that. That was my first thing. I was like, okay, I'm just using sound. I'm triggering sounds over here. I played some shows, and it was cool. Got some cool stuff in Hollywood. Played some different festivals.
And this was after you moved to LA that you were doing.
Yes, this is in 2017, I think.
Was this during the time frame of you kind of couch surfing, or like before or after?
A little bit after.
Okay, gotcha.
I couch surfed for like 9 months to a year-ish.
Okay.
And then I moved in with my girlfriend. I was dating her during that time too, but
gotcha.
it kind of flowed into that.
Sure.
So I moved in with her, and then I was kind of at that point I was doing more. I was playing events in Hollywood. I was running events in Hollywood actually too. It's the other thing I was doing. So we would do actually part of the reason I came up with this was based on that too, because our events that we were running in Hollywood were like typical DJ party events, table service. But then one of the shticks we had is that we'd hire musicians to come play features on top of the music, and that would just become more of a show. So we'd have dancers come in, they do performances. I would strap a djembe over me and put lights inside it and just go around and play around with all the tables and party with people. We have saxophone players, whatever, and then I would bring my drums in and do things that way. So it was a good testing zone where I had this time where I was running these events in Hollywood to actually, do all these different things. So that kind of led me to, so then I was like, man, I see how everybody loves DJs because they go and dance and have fun. They all love the tracks, but they're, DJs just kind of hanging up there. It's not doing anything other than, there was obviously a very big thing that DJs do, but it wasn't in case of what the visuals do. The performance of them is just kind of hanging. So I was like, well, what else can I do? What can I add to this to so I was like, me just playing drums with it is at least something interesting to watch. And then I was like, okay, so then I'm playing things. And then of course it just becomes like how can I make it better? How can I make it better? So I had this thought. I was coming home actually from Disneyland because me and my friends used to go to Disneyland all the time. It's kind of like a little retreat because it kind of feels like a different land. So you go there and I just, was having fun there and then leaving, come back and was doing, just had the inspiration of being like, well, what if it was like I was in a movie theater on some sort of platform and behind me was these visuals that were happening that kind of made it feel like I was traveling with me through some things. So the concept kind of in my mind was it was a movie that meets a music show. That was what I was envisioning trying to create. It's really hard though. So I got a little cheap $500 projector and I started testing things and I started hooking up to my drums where I could trigger drums and it would trigger a visual. And it was challenging because it was so technical because my whole system was like, everything's MIDI synced and I have my laptop triggering Ableton stuff and there's certain sound. I had separate outputs and then I had also running video triggers and I was programming lights. So I had this whole everything self-contained within myself, but it was really challenging to almost to get people to see what I was doing. There was so much happening. It was like, I'm triggering visuals, but you saw the visuals, but you didn't necessarily know that they were in sync with what I was doing. And then all this kind of stuff. But anyways, I started working out and I got to this point where I was like, I need a bigger stage and I need a way because I can only kind of do tester things. It would be like against a wall that was 10 feet by 15 feet, whatever. And it was like, I could project against that. And that gave you a kind of a scene and a concept. But I wanted to figure out a way to actually perform it in a full stage with a full production and shoot it correctly and then, perform it for an audience and then use that as a stage to kind of move forward with the project. So I got introduced to my friend, Simon, and he owns a bunch of stages in LA. And so I was kind of referred to him and he had this really cool warehouse out in Frogtown, just outside Echo Park in LA. And so I went there and we figured out a cool deal. It had one of these cycs. And if you don't know what a cyc is, it's basically a 3-wall room with curved edges and it's all white. And so in camera, it just looks like it disappears. So they have a 30-foot cyc there. And so what we did is we put my staging in this cyc. And I did write a bunch of original music for this project too. And the music was interesting. It was like orchestral meets dance. So I wrote a lot of it with my friend Dave Yaden, who's a Grammy award-winning piano player. And the track I'm going to have my initial track that I was going to have you play was The Creator, it's called. And it's like I'm playing drums, I'm triggering all the bass line stuff on it, and then he's a piano player, and he was doing some of the strings parts on top, and then there's a full classical piano solo that he puts in there in this track too. So it's super eclectic, it's really interesting. So we built this whole show called Mad in the Hat, Journey from the Mundane. And I partnered with this friend of mine who's this chef. And he's a really interesting guy. I love him, but he's really extravagant. And he had a really good following. And he was doing these dinner parties where they were kind of he would do a dinner and he would cook everything. And then there'd be performances that would happen. And he had me do a couple performances. So I was like, cool, let's do one here. Let's do it on a larger scale. let's combine your crowd with mine. And I just want to do this really cool thing in this psych. And we'll use projection and put my visuals projected inside, and I'll play the whole show. And then let's get some other performers in, and we'll do kind of a cool show. And it was a major learning curve of like creative headbutting with us building it. But in the end, we ended up building something cool. So it was like, it started off and was like, just words scrolling down the page with this on the screen with this super nice, cool music. And I come in and I open up this big show. We had my friend come in with a full production light show. He had bought all these brand new lights and gave me a ridiculous deal. He was like, I just got to test them out. So we like set them up. So we had this full light show. And then I met Ifan, who's the guy I work with now too. And Ifan is from the London Underground, and he was just getting into projections. So Simon was working with Ifan. He was like, hey, we're just starting up this projection thing, and why don't I get you in touch with him? So I call Ifan. So Ifan's like, hey man, you're like my second client, but if I'll give you a good deal if we can just kind of guinea pig on this. I was like, great. So he brings in a couple projectors, we set them up, and so we're doing this whole show, and this whole show is pretty epic. We had like a drag queen singer, we had a stripper contortionist, we had multiple musicians, cellist, pianist, 3 vocalists, another like dancer, and then the chef came and did this like specialty cooking thing at the end, and then I closed it out with a big drum thing. It was a crazy show, really eclectic, really interesting. So me and Ifan got along working together so well that he was like, dude, do you want to come work with me on this? I got some cool projects coming on. So I was like, sure, sounds good. So I was a couple months after that show that I didn't work with him, and he ended up doing some really cool stuff. He did this MBA job he was with, and where he was doing this super cool, like he had to build this projection box that ended up projecting onto this jersey. That's like the jersey of the future. Anyways, cool project. And then after that, I started working with him kind of as his assistant. We were both kind of figuring the stuff out as we go. And we started doing some cool little film jobs here and there. And I had never even been on a film set. And the difference in film set to music industry is substantial too. Because like music, you have to do everything yourself. Like they'll pay you $100 for you to show up with all your gear, all your rehearsal you did beforehand, everything. And then you set up, you work super hard. They pay you $100 and you get all, and it's like so much effort to do just this little thing. But everybody's like hungry because you're like trying to build something. And then you go to the film stage and it's like a village of people. They have catering for you. And then like everybody is super specialized in their like experts in their exact fields, So then I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. Super creative still, because I'm looking here, like I show up on set and it was like the art direction on these things is amazing. They're building these sets for 2 days and they look fantastic. And then as soon as they shoot the little thing, take them down. I was like, well, that's crazy and really cool still. So we started doing a bunch of little jobs like that. And we did a bunch of projection jobs for like events, little underground dance events, whatever. And that was kind of our business. And we were doing that as well as I was doing the music thing and playing around. And then pandemic hits and everything shuts down, which was challenging because it was like, okay, it was actually a big moment where I had to go inside myself. And I talked to my best friend about this a bit too, because it was like a mental change. Because I had come out to LA and my whole entire career beforehand, I had set out to be a drummer, to be a pro drummer. And I wanted to accomplish, I had goals set out. I have everything I wanted to accomplish in that. And a lot of the goals I had done, which is cool. But there was still some major ones. Like I wanted to play with some like serious major artists as a drummer and be on tour for a certain amount of time. There's some certain specifics I wanted. And when the pandemic hit, I just looked at everything. I was like, I just don't know what it's going to, like, I had to let go of control of that initial vision in a way. And as soon as I said, okay, I'm still a drummer. I'll always be a drummer. I will love drumming. And when drumming comes, I'm going to do it and take it and love it. But I can do other things that are still creative, that still satisfy me. And literally months later, Ifan and I get a call to do a TikTok video for this girl. The video was called Mad at Disney. So we came in with this super cool solution because they had to build like 8 sets and they didn't have the budget to do this. So we were like, well, we could do this cool little plastic thing and rear project on it and we can create the content for it too. And we solved it for like 3 of their sets instantly. So they we did a great job on that. We got such great feedback that we got recommended, which, like you were saying earlier, this is how it always happens. You know, you do good work, you show up, you're consistent, and then you get recommended, and it flows. So we got recommended for this big Facebook bid, and it was crazy because it was like they were looking to do some sort of XR thing, and then we can talk about XR too.
Oh, dude, we're gonna get into it. I do want to stop you quick, just because. I want, while the image is still in people's brains of the Mad in the Hat, I want you to be able to pick a song, one of the ones that you made, and I want us to play that right now, and then we'll come back in and get right back into this, because this is like a really cool subject to talk about with people that people don't realize. I tried to explain this, and I've said it before on my show, that like you can have these ideas, and as an artist, you're an entrepreneur. It's the same thing, really, on a lot of levels anyways. Even if you have this idea, like this is what I want to do,
right,
you can't be that stubborn. If things aren't working because of X, Y, or Z, the pandemic being one of those, one of those things, you have to be willing to like kind of move in different directions and do different things. And that's where we're going to get into with this next thing that I didn't even knew that you did until I showed up and saw this. But anyway, so this is one thing that I think people don't understand is like, we're in different worlds, right? You know, when you move from somewhere like Colorado to LA, people think because you're playing on a stage that you must make a lot of money. And it's like, dude, the expenses here are so insane. It does not work that way at all.
And you get paid less out here too.
Oh, I suppose because it's a saturated market, right? There's just like so many people. Versus where I live, you can have a little hobby shop like a skateboard and own a house, you know what I mean? And own a house. Versus like here, like that's clearly not the case. So when the pandemic comes up, and I tell people this in business a lot, not that I know everything about it, but I know a little bit anyways, is you can't force things to work. Yes, you have to have a creative vision of what you want to do, and you have to like stick to it to a certain degree. You don't want to lose your identity, because otherwise, like, what's the point, right? But you get put in positions where it's like either an opportunity is way too good to pass up, which I say this as well. People who are good in business are the ones who recognize when the right opportunity pops up, because opportunities are there all the time. Yeah. But it's like when the right one pops up, you got to pounce. It's like right now, whether you're like fully ready or not, you recognize like, holy shit, this is the one. I'm going to pounce on it. So that's kind of like where you were going with it a little bit. So we'll get right back into that. Cool. Is you were doing the Mad in the Hat, you were performing, and it's not that you wanted to stop performing necessarily, but all of a sudden this opportunity popped up with this guy with all this new tech stuff. And now you're kind of going in a whole different direction where like we're sitting in the studio where you can like film stuff for movies and stuff like that, right? So let's get right back into it. So you're making these sets for TikTok, and then all of a sudden this deal with Facebook comes up.
Yeah, so it was like a random call like 2 days after the video that I got from a producer, and he was like, dude, I have a call with a director in 15 minutes to pitch this. So he said, this is what we're looking for. He described what the show was generally and was like, here's the solution we're trying to shoot for. Do you think you can come up with something? So I call Ifan and was like, hey, dude, this is what we got. And so we would call in the producer. We chat him through like a rough concept of something we think we could do, never having known we could potentially do this thing. He calls the director, pitches it. And basically, I guess we found out later that it was between three different things. It was the expensive route, which is an XR stage, like a full LED volume. There was a cheap route, which I could go with the guy could do it on a green screen and do it cheap, or there was us. It was kind of the middle of the range budget. And still, we gave him like a ridiculous deal to do this too. But we did the show. We built this XR stage using projection. So to talk about what XR is, because it's very confusing, and it's a brand new, it's not brand, but it's pretty new comparatively. It came about, the main way people know of XR is from The Mandalorian. So The Mandalorian, they did a bunch of press on this too, is how they shot this. The Mandalorian is all shot on one stage. And what you do is you build out the set. You actually build physical objects, which is, dirt and mountains and whatever, like, and their spaceship actually in the scene. And then it reaches an LED wall, and the technology uses a camera tracking system to see where that camera's looking, and then whatever the LED, and it moves the world virtually around it, so that basically you don't have to do green screen anymore. It's moving backgrounds that are also 3D in depth. So you get all this stuff that happens in camera, so it's much better. It's just prohibitively expensive. So right now, Mandalorian can do it because they can afford it, or like certain shows can, or like Katy Perry did a big XR video. Maroon 5 did one recently. So there's it's super expensive. It's like $100,000 to $200,000 a day to shoot on one of these stages. So obviously when Facebook went to look and see if they, or at least the production house that went to go fulfill this job, it was just way out of budget to get one of those big stages. So they talked to us like, hey, can you figure out a solution? We're like, yeah, we can do it. And it was, of course, like we had no idea, but we're like, let's figure it out. So we had friends that worked at one of the other stages that we were about to hire just as a consultant. And he literally just told us a suggestion of what to buy for our servers. So we order that, and then we start to try to build this thing, and we find another couple guys, and we basically just found a couple tech geniuses that really helped. One guy named Tanner Thompson, T2 Visuals. But he built this XR stage. He got it figured out for us. And it was very hard to do because with projection, it's different than LED walls. You have to blend the projectors, and it makes it much different with how the computer looks at things. But we got it to work. We ran this TV show for 12 weeks. It ended up being like a full-time thing. But then at the end of it, we now have a full XR stage here. And it worked amazingly well. And it's a miracle it even worked, to be honest, because I guess we're talking to like a lot of our friends at the other XR stages, and most of them need that like anchored LED wall because it gives you in virtual space, it gives you like a very specific location of where things are. But with projection, again, it's a little bit more difficult to define. And we got it working, but it was like a lot more work to get there. So now that's where we're at. So we went full circle where Ifan and I started music and then doing visuals, and we still love doing that kind of work. And then now we got to build an XR stage, which is where we're at now. But then so now we have a full XR stage, which is amazing. But then we're not limited to that. We just create on whatever medium we have. We have lasers, depth sensors. We're about to get a mocap suit. We got obviously tons of 10 or 12 projector, like the super high-end pro ones. And we just keep building our inventory as we have different jobs come in, different needs. And then now that everything's opening back up again from the pandemic, now we're looking forward to going back into music. Because now it's like, okay, this is open. But now I've learned so much in this past 6 months, but it was all, like you were saying, from letting go of my initial thing. I was stuck on saying, I need to be a drummer, because part of it was ego. Well, it was all ego, but it was like, I wanted to prove to my family and all my friends, like, I've chosen this journey and I achieved this journey. But it was like, it doesn't always play out that way. And then as soon as I let go, just gave it up and then let the path fall how it should, then I ended up creating some of the most amazing things I could have ever imagined creating. It pushed me much higher, and you start collaborating with a lot more people. And as soon as you learn how valuable it is to collaborate, then it's just a different world. Because collaboration, like, you're not limited to your own mind and your own creativity. It's like you start to bring in people who are masterminds in their own ways. And then when you combine together, what you create is better than any one of you could have created alone. So watching this process happening and then being the one to build it. Because again, like when we were starting this XR stage, we had no idea how this stuff worked. And so we're on the phone with, international companies about to order gear, and it's expensive equipment. It's easily $400,000 to $500,000 worth of equipment we had to figure out, learn. I had to build these servers, put them together. I learned how to do a camera, how to build cameras, how to do a camera tracking system, the Stipe, and like, it's so endless. And it's like, you have to learn it though. But then once you learn it, then you pass it along to other people. You let them manage that, and then you move on to a bigger thing. But then it's cool to see like the evolution from day one. It's like, okay, I came here as a drummer to now, look, I'm leading the team. I got to do Maroon 5 a couple weeks ago. We were on stage I was doing projection mapping for one of their live events they did. That's still so rad. Like the fact that I would initially have been a dream to play with Maroon 5, and now I'm working on a video of theirs, and it wouldn't have really ever happened. I could play with Maroon 5 because they have their drummer, but still just the idea of being able to work creatively in these massive, super high level things that I'd never thought I would have been able to do, or that I chose to do or wanted to go down that path. But if I had stayed stuck in the initial route that I had thought was the right path, I wouldn't have hit the level of achievement I've been able to hit now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have too clear of an image of what they want, and they're stuck on that, where like they're missing the reason why they want that, right?
Yeah.
So like here's an example. People want to make a lot of money. Okay, but why?
Yeah.
Right? It's not because they want the money. It's because they want what the money can afford, right?
True.
But people like lose that because they're so stuck, right? So for you, you're like, I want to be a musician. Okay, why?
Right,
You already
exactly.
did that. You accomplished the skills and built up your skills for drumming. And yeah, anyone can get better. But the reason you wanted to do that was because you wanted to be involved in creating things, and especially in the music world. And then all of a sudden, when you realize when these opportunities pop up that like, I don't have to drum to be involved in creating music, I can still be doing this in just different ways. And now all of a sudden it's kind of exciting because I'm like learning a bunch of stuff again because I'm not plateaued on this particular skill set.
Right.
That's when your mind opens up and you're like, holy shit, I could be doing so many things, you know? Because with me, I was talking to people, and I've kind of said this story a little bit where like when I travel, I try to visit any locally owned skateboard shop because like in the skateboarding world, we always talk about how there's this like this massive worldwide network of friends where you're automatically friends with anyone else that skates, right? Because you have something to connect with. And I didn't realize that that could be anything else. I thought it was just the skateboarding world because that's what I was about. But I realized it's not because of skateboarding. It's because I'm talking about things I'm passionate about.
Right.
And I'm passionate about creating entrepreneurship and in general, like being fulfilled by what things you do. So when all of a sudden and how this show really came about was I was a guest on somebody else's skateboarding podcast. I thought that was fun. Talked with this rapper who I like wanted to wear my stuff. He used to skate, and I was kind of interviewing him, just like hanging out. And I was like so into the conversation, and it was because I was passionate about something else that he was also passionate about.
Right.
Which was just like creating. So that's the cool part, right? Is like all of a sudden now you're in this spot where all of a sudden you have way more freedom. And another thing I want to touch on too that people don't realize is the hustle that has to go into this. You could have, and this is what a lot of people do, you could have gotten that contract with Facebook and then went on a vacation and thought, okay, this is it, right? I made this much money, and now I can try to make this much money. But in the entrepreneurship world, if you really want to grow, what you do is you look at this and you say, well, this isn't my personal money. This is how I can fund the next project that I want to do. Right? So you take that money, you invest it into better equipment, and then all of a sudden now, you know, not that long later, really, you're in a position where you have like the world so much more open to you.
Yeah,
you know,
very
there's
true.
so many other opportunities that you can now say yes to. And I also love this. People love to find excuses, which is really unfortunate. People ask me, how do you become successful in this, that, or whatever? And my usual answer is, you got to get out of your own way.
Yeah.
You see these limitations, or people say, oh, well, I can't do it because of X, Y, and Z. Well, if you're looking for a reason you can't do it, you'll find one, right?
True. Absolutely.
But if you take the opposite approach and you say, well, no, I know what I want to do, there's got to be a way to do it. There's just going to be a way to do it. That like not taking no for an answer mentality like you did with this project where somebody comes to you with this bid and you're like, well, there has to be a way. There has to be a way. I'm not going to take no. Like, this is possible. I'm going to make this happen. And when you have that mentality, again, it's like the world's wide open because it doesn't matter that you don't have experience in this, that, or whatever. You can always gain it.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah,
if you think of yourself as like a video game character leveling up, just because at one point you're using a sword for whatever many levels doesn't mean you can't pick up a different item and learn that throughout the game. You know what I mean?
I mean,
can
throwing yourself in
continually
the
grow.
deep end is how we've done it.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, otherwise you grow too slowly.
Totally.
You know, you got to push to that just outside of safety. There's like a zone. It's like you go too far where there's too much new information and your mind gets scared. You know, you go, oh, I'm overwhelmed. And then you go back to that zone where it's like, I'm not safe, but I'm still able to handle the new information and the problems that are coming, you know? And that's like the zone you want to live in.
Yeah, you got to get beyond that comfort zone. And everybody, I forget who I was talking to about on the show. He was talking about everyone's risk tolerances. Everybody has different risk tolerances. Clearly, you have like
I have
a pretty
very
significant
high
one.
risk on. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, which helps. But I would say you kind of have to take risks, right? Because otherwise, you're not going to learn new things. You're going to be stuck in your old ways, which is okay if that's really all you want to do. And I'm not trying to downplay anybody that finds comfort and wants to stay in that path.
Sure.
But if you want to do something you're passionate about for a living, more than likely you're going to have to push yourself way out of your comfort zone. Because if it was easy to like learn and do what you're currently doing, the opportunity wouldn't have been there because somebody was going to be doing it. Right. The only reason it was open was because this was new technology and nobody else had put that time and energy into it yet. So you saw the opportunity and you're like, well, okay, I'm just going to go for it 100%.
And it won't be long until everybody else figures what we did out and figured out it's cheaper. And, so it's like we have a very small window too of where we can like make this awesome and do what we can with it,
Yeah, but on the flip side of that, I refer people to this episode all the time. It's with Andrew Cannon. He's the brand manager for Santa Cruz Skateboards. Super smart guy. This was on season 2. But I was talking to him about like social media being an issue, where it's like, how do you deal with these challenges about how like this is coming in? And he made an extremely good point. And I know I've said this a bunch of times, but I love this one, is that when new challenges pop up because the world changes, if you came into a situation, you would not have any opportunity because there is somebody else doing it for 30 years, right? If new challenges didn't pop up. When new technology and new challenges pop up, it's actually a completely level playing field because no one's an expert yet.
True.
Nobody.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you want to hop on it at the forefront, yes, nobody can teach you, but you're not at a disadvantage to anybody else.
Right.
Within a certain degree, obviously finances and different things come into play, but for the most part, it's a level playing field where it's like, oh, this opportunity exists. So coming back to what I was just saying what you were just saying, where there's this opportunity right now with this thing and people are going to hop on it. With the way technology moves, there's going to be something else in 2 years anyways that's going to pop up. And if you continue to go along the path that you're going, you're going to see that and you're going to dive right in again with this new challenge and you're going to keep staying ahead and you're going to keep evolving and new, like more and more opportunities are going to continue to pop up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
At least that's like kind of how I feel where it's going. So now you're doing all these and you want to be working. Do you want to work just in the music space or like what, I guess?
I don't care. Actually, what we're going for now, because it's me and Ifan mainly, and Simon too, who's involved with us, but Ifan and I are kind of building, but we just want to do super high level creative art. I think the next thing we want to get into is even like when there's R&D budgets for things, and we'll have our XR stage and we'll have our crews operating. When we want to come in to do certain projects, we'll come do those, but then we can go on bigger projects that are more like, we have budget for 6 months to work on figuring some concept out. Cause that's really where our minds like excel. And most of the stuff is like just really high level problem solving. Almost everything in this, it's like the kind of problems we do, it's just like, okay, this is the problem. How do we solve it? And it may take $10,000 or it may take 30 hours or it may take 3 weeks or it may, maybe the technology doesn't exist and you can solve that problem by figuring out that technology. But like, that's kind of the path that it ends up falling down,
Yeah, absolutely. You always have to be problem solving. I try to tell people like in business, again, I guess I keep coming back to business, but that's whatever. It's just kind of how it works. I have two pieces of advice for people. And the one that I push a lot of people to, or I say a lot of times, is the best salespeople. Everyone has to be a good salesperson in business. You have to, okay? The best salespeople are the people that sell themselves as the solution to people's needs. Hey, I can contact David. He's going to solve this problem for me. Yeah. Whatever this problem is, whether it's getting people to this show, whether it's entertaining people at this show, whether it's providing this stage or this equipment or hiring a team, they have to think of David as my solution for this problem, right? And then the other piece of advice I tell people is all you have to do for people to want to work with you moving forward is identify what is mutually beneficial for you and never ask huge favors. Just hit them up if you think it actually benefits them. And then be nice to work with, right? Because if you're good to work, like if they enjoy working with you and what you're doing helps them, but it also helps you, it's this symbiosis that's like, oh, okay, now I want to continue to do this thing. I want to continue to help. And that's what happened with, I'm sorry, what's his name? Ifan? Ifan. Yep. So that's what happened with him, right? He has this equipment and he needs to find somebody that can help him with this stuff. You didn't have the money necessarily to buy this equipment right away. You identified this opportunity together and then you can continue to grow.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like that's really like all you have to try to look for.
Yeah.
And to get back into like, you're not done with music, right? So you're doing all these sets and stuff, but like your music can only really benefit from it because of like the show. You now have access to these different tools to be able to totally change what your show could be. Like there's more opportunity with that. So then how did your music kind of develop from going into, because most people go doing DJ stuff for a long time. How did your music kind of develop from when you were playing for other bands into the Mad in the Hat stuff? And then now coming out of this pandemic where you've had a little bit, probably too much alone time like all of us, like what are your kind of plans with that stuff?
It's interesting. So, I mean, Colorado was all about live bands. So like you said, that's exactly right. So I grew up in the church playing with bands there, and that was kind of where that started. And then I left that, and then I got into obviously more rock, and then I came out to LA, jumped into pop. And then obviously electronic music was just prevalent in Denver, very prevalent there. And then also in LA, it's a big scene here too. So I kind of fell into it, but I kind of approached it like I had from the band side, which is more of a song kind of a thing, which is how a lot of mainstream EDM is. They're more songs. And so that's kind of what my initial thing was. My original tracks were very cinematic because that's kind of where my mind went with the whole production. But all my other tracks I would use were just like mainstream remixes of, popular dance tracks or whatever. So then I went to a couple events, like some underground dance events here, and actually meeting my business partner Irfan, it was like a big part of it because he's from the London Underground. So he like introduced me to all this music that I had heard. I'd been to some events, tech house, whatever, but it was like different until you actually experience it. So I went to this event called the Mayan Warrior event. Mayan Warrior is a big art car that goes to the Burning Man events. And then every year before they went out, they kind of just do in downtown LA, they just kind of do a big hang with, several thousand people, just big dance event. And then had like an amazing experience there, and it was just different when everybody has experienced the concert thing, when the whole energy, everybody's moving and enjoying the music together is a synergistic thing that happens. To me, it was like amplified in the dance world. When everybody is dancing together, it was just like a different level to me. So it got me into it. And then once I got into it, I kind of learned how to listen to it, which is a big thing in any style of music. When I was growing up learning drums, I listened to certain styles of music and then I would play like that. But then as soon as I started, because I studied with a Brazilian drummer for 2 years, it was amazing. But I had to learn how to listen to the music. I had to learn how to hear it and how to play to sound like I was speaking authentically in that language. Because music is, you are communicating. Like if I'm playing drums, I play drums with how I would speak it, so to speak. So I would play rock and be this way, and then but then if I go play Latin, I'd still play it with my rock influence, because I didn't learn how to speak Latin music correctly yet. So it's kind of the same thing with dance music, guys. So I kind of need to be introduced to it, and I need to learn how to listen to it. And the difference was, in most music, like traditional music performance, pop music, whatever, you're listening to, let's say, a guitar solo, and there's a person who actually plays the solo, and you're watching their hands move fast up and down or a drum solo, or fast, like, all this thing. You're impressed with the performance aspect of it. But when I had to learn is figure out that what dance music is, it's not about the physical performance anymore. It's about the sound design performance, because you'll have just a kick drum beating on the beat, and then you'll have a cool bass line that's interesting, but then you'll have all these cool effects that are happening, and they're live, and they're morphing and changing, and they're very interesting. But you have to know or learn how to listen to it. Otherwise, it's not interesting. So it was boring to me beforehand, but once I learned it, I fell in love with it. And so that's why this last track I kind of did is more of that kind of underground dance. It's very simple. It tends to feel repetitive, and it is repetitive, but it's the nuances in between things. And I love nuance because I feel like that's kind of the balance of where everything is. I think today's society, I could even go more social. I think today's society is very split, far left, far right, and there's very little nuanced discussion in the middle of how do we, I think it's just important. So I love nuance anyways. I think it's where the details is where things really elevate. There was someone that gave me a good analogy. What's the difference between a good hotel and a great hotel? And the answer is just the details. A good hotel will still have a clean bed, clean sheets, nice shower, It'll still look nice. But then the great hotel, they put a little chocolate on your lip pillow. They put a little, the white robe. They have everything is just, those little details are what really elevates. And that was the same thing when I started working with my teams. It's like those little details are what elevates you to no longer be, only good, but great. And so anyway, so I fell in love with that style of music, and then I created a whole new show based around that. It was still Mad in the Hat, and actually right before the pandemic hit, I went to Vegas and did a big showcase for a bunch of event planners. It was awesome. Everybody was happy, and I actually did that show, which is hilarious to me, because before I would have been like, no one will ever like this kind of music because it's so underground. Like everybody only wants to hear the mainstream stuff, and I would do mainstream music, but in my own way, which is cool. But when I went out there, it was like, I'm just going to do my own thing. And I did, the underground kind of dance stuff. The crowd, I didn't maybe get the people who were interested in mainstream events, but I got the cool crowds. They're like, hey, we do this side tent at Coachella. This kind of thing would be great over there. So it's like you start finding your own path that way when you start digging in and finding a particular type of music or a particular type of thing that you really love that's like nuanced to you that you can obsess over. And then the deeper you get into that and the better you get at that, the more unique you are. And that's what it really comes down to. The more unique you are, the better in a lot of ways, in my opinion, at least. Just because your uniqueness is what differentiates you from the crowd. So you have to kind of figure out what's your shtick and then just like double down on it, so to speak. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to like you can only be the best version of you. No one else can, right? You can't be the best version of anyone else because they are that person.
Right, exactly.
So you absolutely have to be, yourself. And I love what you're talking about with the details because I've tried to explain this to people. They think that if they do 90%, that it's good enough. And it's like, well, the problem is 90% of people do 90%.
Right. That's exactly
it's the 10% that it's like, and I forget when I was saying this, but not long ago, I was listening to an episode of mine back and I was talking about it. And I was saying how like, whatever project you're working on, finish it and then have a full month to like, let it soak in and think about it and decide if you want to make any changes, decide if you want to update this, that, or whatever, because you probably will, right? And that little bit of extra time is going to separate you so much from all the other people. So just like be patient and continue to work on things. So now like moving forward, what are the things that are going to be coming up in the coming, like, I don't know, a few months? Obviously you're hoping to sign contracts with a bunch of, bigger commercial people and different things that way. And I assume you're planning on starting to play this new music and stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, well, right now we just opened again with our stage here. We after the Facebook show ended, which was like right at the end of March, we were like, let's take a month or so and like upgrade our system as much as we can. So we got graphics. We spent all this tech money and spent like tons of hours and like we majorly upgraded our whole system. So now we're bringing in directors and showcasing, and that's what we're kind of in the zone for now is like getting more work in. So we have a bunch of work coming up already booked. And then the idea is let's just get this place rocking. So now it's fun. It's like I'm at a different stage now because at the last 6 months I've been here probably between 16 to 20 hours a day since mid-October to now. It's been, I didn't leave for Christmas. I had Christmas Day and Christmas Eve off. And other than that, it was like full court press constantly. It was absolutely exhausting. I reached the end of that whole thing and I had like a 3-day weekend off, and then now we're back at it. Now it's chilled back a little bit, which is nice because I'm needing a break. But now it's like I would have to be here like at 6 or 7 a.m. to start things off, and then we didn't have any other staff, so I'd be here closing at midnight or 1 every day. So it's going. But now like we're getting rolling. So now's the process. We're finding our team members. Like I just bringing in these guys here, training them up, and so now it's like we got to build the crew to be able to handle this stuff moving forward. So that's kind of the stage I'm at now, which is really exciting. It's different. It's super creative, and I never would have realized it is. It sounded like, oh, it's just boring business stuff. And, I guess it kind of is, but maybe because it's not, because we're in this crazy creative world. But then music will come back too. I think it just, as soon as I start going back to events, and I just got to talk to someone and be like, hey, I want to play. And I'm not even worried right now about like, trying to make money doing it. I just want to play out and like have some fun and see what people dig on it. And, and so far the feedback has been cool about the different shows I've done. And now too, I have a rad stage and with this crazy technology. So the easy next move is going to be bring my drums in here and do some sort of crazy XR stage thing with lasers and something, because we love lasers too. It's fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that you made the point where like the drums aren't going anywhere.
Right, exactly.
Because I've had quite a few people, the last like couple of years, went through a lot of personal things through my divorce and everything. And I've had a lot of my friends be like, dude, I haven't been seeing you skate all that much. And I'm like, well, I do still skate. Like I went out last week, so I still skate. Yeah. But I try to explain to people like I don't really have to prove anything to anyone at this point in my life. I'm 30, almost 31. I've done probably the best skateboarding that I was going to do already for me personally. And I'm totally satisfied with it. And the skateboard's still there. Literally anytime I want to hop on it, it's still there.
Yeah.
It's not disappearing. Drums aren't going to go anywhere. So if you want to go do something different, even though like everyone thinks of you as a drummer, there's no reason you have to. It's your life. You can do whatever you want with it, right? Yeah. And then like true friends, people that really care about you, are going to see that you're happy doing this thing and are going to support it anyways. But they're going to be stoked when all of a sudden you're coming back and performing again. So so I'm excited to see that for sure. I get to this point in the show and I always want to ask this. This is like my favorite part of the show. I always ask people to share an experience, something that you're really, really grateful for, but only happened because you chose to pursue your passion, in this case for music, for creating. I've shared a lot of them. This one, this is really cool. The fact that I'm here, I've never been to anything like this before. So thank you so much for like welcoming me into your studio. And this only happened because of the show. I interviewed Wayne Hoffman, which was like random. I was at a Cava bar. This Cava tender was like, oh, I have a friend who would be good for the show. Ended up being Wayne Hoffman, this illusionist who's like world famous and dope. Interviewed him. We became friends. And then when I was like, hey, I'm going out to LA, you got anybody? He's like, yeah, my buddy David's dope. So all of a sudden here I am in LA, like crazy that I'm even here. So
yeah, it's awesome, man.
For you, what's an experience that you can share, something specific that you're just like really stoked happened?
Well, to be honest, like the biggest one that comes to mind is the process of the Facebook thing, because it changed my life massively. And everything, I couldn't have been successful at it if I hadn't come from music. So the entire training I had done, because in the end, the way we were doing the show, it was so complex because we had XR happening in the background of the actor. It was Will Wheaton. Will Wheaton's on the stage, XR behind him, and then we had thrones that they had built, art department built on the stage for him, and we were projection mapping them with another set of projectors. And then we would projection map like a character that he was talking to. And then I would be off stage triggering the conversation that he was having back and forth, as well as triggering color changes that were going in the back of the scene and everything. So everything relied, it was basically the director, me, and Will Wheaton for this whole show. Like I was sitting there like action, and then I was like conversation with him at the back here, color change here. And it was like, if I hadn't been through the level of expertise in music direction that I had done and playing drums and leading shows, because that was the other thing. When I was playing drums, a lot of times as a music director. So meaning I would run rehearsals. I was the one who picked the set order. I was the one that would run the band for the most part. And so if I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't have been able to be successful in this environment. And especially because the system got better by the end of it. By the end of it, it was pretty much like I had gotten it all programmed up, so it was much easier. But at the beginning, it was absolutely insane. It was the highest level performance I'd ever done, and I've performed in front of tens of thousands of people. So it was like the level of pressure when there's like a full crew, everybody watching, and like if I push a wrong button slightly wrong, then the whole shot is done, and it's costing ridiculous amounts of money. So it's very stressful. But that is definitely one that was like, I would never have thought that I would be here. I never wanted to be in the film industry anyways. And then to go from music and then realize that the skill set and the know-how and the work ethic, because musicians they get a rap for being really lazy, but they're either really lazy or like really hard workers, because you get nothing for the amount of work you do. But like most of the musician friends I was working with were super hard workers. So if you take that into any field, you work super hard and you just kill it, and you also gain all the past musical experience I had done came together, and it allowed me to be super successful at the right time and the right opportunity that I needed. And it changed my life. So now I'm here 6 months later, and now I'm on a podcast talking to you. And now you would have talked to me about the Mad in the Hat thing, but like this is like a next evolution of where things are going. The whole world is wanting XR. It's a crazy thing. And to be on the forefront of it in a way that nobody's doing it is really like, it's a very proud moment, and it's a super high accomplishment. Because again, there's not that many people in the world that know how to do this, especially on projectors. So it's like, the way you do it is like the encouragement I'll give to people. Nothing you learn is invaluable. So study and be interested in everything, because I'm interested in a lot, and I just talk to people. I see what they're doing, talking to the camera guy and figure out what he does. But now that little bit of knowledge I learned about camera allowed me to figure out the camera that we just bought and figure out how to, like, it's one of those things you just have to kind of be open to trying new experiences. And then you'll be surprised at where the world or the universe or whatever you want to call it, where it leads you. When you just go, pick something, pick a direction, and give it everything you have and see what happens. You know, you don't know where it's going to happen. You can't predict it. You can't plan it. You can give a general thing like, I'm sure that if you work really hard at something, it's going to produce something, and that's great. And then how far you go down that road, you won't necessarily know, but who knows? Maybe it'll end up, you'll end up at a bigger dream than you could have imagined. That's at least what's happened to me. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it comes down to, like, I like to tell people, you're never too old to pick something up, right?
Yeah.
And you think you're way far behind because you didn't go along this certain path, but that's not necessarily
Not
true.
at all.
Because this whole path that you took, you didn't realize that all these skills were going to translate, but they will.
Yep.
When I started my show, I had no experience in any like kind of entertainment stuff, but I knew how to open a business. I knew how to develop relationships like that. I knew how to speak on a mic because I'd been doing all these skate events and stuff, which was like
Right.
not something I really thought that skill would translate, but it does. That's why it's so fun to continue to try new things, because you continue to grow, and then of course new opportunities come from it. So we're coming to the end of the show. Thank you so much for having me over at your spot. I like to ask at the end, now that people, and you can shout yourself out again here, now that people have listened and they're stoked on everything that you're doing, one more time, where can people go and follow you, contact you? And then moving forward, how can people support what you do? Do they need to go subscribe to you on YouTube, or like, what's the best way they can support you?
Well, again, find me. Mad in the Hat Drums is my Instagram, and all my social medias. Everything is Mad in the Hat, but Mad in the Hat Drums, or Create This LA. Create This LA is going to be where you see all the creative, like visual stuff we're doing, and then I'll be keeping all my other stuff on Mad in the Hat Drums. How to support me? I guess just follow me on there. To be honest, I kind of took a break from social media a bit during the pandemic. I just kind of wanted to step away and focus. It's been kind of nice. But I know I need to get back into it. So hit me up there. Let's have conversations. I mean, you hit me up there. I'm probably a couple days late, but I at least talked back to you. And, I'd like to just kind of meet new people, especially if you're coming through LA. Come check us out. We're a small boutique studio, but we like to just hang out and do cool shit.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.